Hello, I've been promoted from microphone guy to my actual job, which is digital product manager for NCCRED. I'm going to talk today a bit about our new website, theknow.org.au, and a bit about some of the work we do to make design decisions in the process of developing websites. I want to say first up very strongly, I'm not a researcher, and some of the things you see in this presentation might upset some research sensibilities, but bear with me. So what is the know.org.au? It's a public website that came out of the co-design process for the prompt response network that Brendan and Paul spoke about before. It's a public website that compiles all state and territory public health alerts to create a national overview of emerging drugs of concern. So there's the same alerts that Amy and Alice spoke about earlier, and it's separate to the Know community, which is a private network. The know.org.au is designed for anyone, and we had some audiences in mind for this website when we designed it that came out of the co-design process. People who use drugs, who might be interested in a substance they're intending to use, that they've heard some things about, relatives and friends of people who use drugs for the same reason, and then also a wide range of professionals who might want to see at a glance recent alerts that have been published by agencies that are publishing alerts. And we went through a pretty standard kind of process of digital product development for this, starting off with a co-design process, going through branding, visual design, prototyping and testing, and build and release. And I'm going to focus on the kind of evidence gathering, insight gathering, prototyping and testing, because that's where all the assumptions you have about how your website's going to work come up against real people. And I want to talk about some of the methods and tactics we use to make those decisions in a shorter time frame. And one design problem I want to focus on in particular is how we should categorize drug alerts. So with a large range of alerts that are being published, growing larger, we know that we want to help people find the alerts that are relevant to them. One way, obviously, would be by jurisdiction, so they can find alerts that are relevant to where they live, or states and territories that are close to where they live if they're in a border location. But we also wanted to help them find drug alerts based on the drugs they might intend to consume, or drugs they've heard about that are circulating in the community. We knew we wanted not to reinvent the wheel with a new classification system, but we also wanted to use labels and language that made sense for people who maybe don't have a high level of drug literacy. And we kind of had a feeling that existing classification systems might not be helpful for our audiences to find relevant drug alerts on the know.org.au. And the other thing to remember is that we're not necessarily trying to come up with an all-encompassing classification system. We're just trying to come up with a set of categories that helps people find the content that we have, which is still a limited set of drug alerts, but growing. Thankfully, there's a discipline and practice in the digital world that helps us make sense of this. It's called information architecture. It's the discipline of making information findable and understandable. If you've ever used a website, which I hope you have, and you've engaged with a menu or a filter or a set of categories, you've engaged with an information architecture decision. If you go on Amazon and you're looking for a book, the decision whether to put it in literary fiction or romance is an information architecture decision. Same if you went down the road to the gallery, the decision where to put different paintings or works of art is the same. And card sorting is a kind of informal, tactical information gathering method. I'm not using the R word, to test the usefulness of an information architecture with real people. And the reason it's called card sorting is because in its most analog form, you're literally putting web pages on cards and asking people to sort them into groups. You can do open card sorting where you ask the participants to come up with their own categories, or you can do closed card sorting where you give them a set of predetermined categories and ask them to work with them. And about a year ago, using software that helps you to do card sorting, we presented a sample of testers with the titles of 12 actual past drug alerts and asked them to sort them into two sets of categories. One which is based on the drug wheel, and another which is based on a slightly messier and potentially but more kind of plain language set of categories that we devised. And many of you will know the drug wheel as a way of understanding drugs based on their effects. These are the two sets of categories that we used. You'll see the drug wheel on the left and on the right. The completists among you will be really stressed out by this because it's a mix of categories and drug types. But again, remember, the job is not to categorize everything, but to come up with a useful system for the content we have. This is what card sorting looks like in practice. Testers are asked to drag and drop the alert titles into groups based on where they would expect to find it. What we learned testing the drug wheel are kind of theory that those existing sets of categories might not be that helpful. Only 2 out of the 12 alerts had a majority select the correct category. Categories work well for LSD and heroin and opioids, but the testers found it really hard to place MDMA and GHB in the correct categories. Testing the drugs sold as categories, 10 out of 12 alerts were placed by a majority of testers into the correct category, with a couple of challenging ones. Although it makes sense that if you're asked to categorize a MDMA alert, you would put it in a category that says MDMA. So this has to be taken with a pinch of salt. It's not an exact replication of the real world context of use. If you're looking for a drug alert because of something you've heard about, you're probably not going to start with the titles of the alerts. You're just going to follow a system to try and find information you might be interested in. We have limited information about the demographics. So the company we use to recruit, we know they're Australian adults, but we don't know much about their interest or literacy in drugs. Different groups tested each category structure. So it's not an exact match on the sample. And when the drug name category is obviously in the title of the alert, it gives the tester a strong clue. And unlike the drug wheel, our categories are not all encompassing. So I'll have to expand and retest them over time as new alerts are published and maybe they don't fit into our system. So we don't know that our system is perfect. We don't claim that it's perfect, but we're pretty confident it's better for the people we intend to use the website. What's next? In the medium term, as a digital person, it's really important to focus on the fact that the no is not a finished product. We'll continue to gather this kind of insight and research and hopefully have it informed by some of the things we're hearing about today about drug alerts more broadly. We want to look at, in particular, how website users respond to the design of alerts, what additional content we need to provide context to the alerts, as Amy was talking about earlier, and whether we should be publishing alerts from extra sources. But in the short term, we're really proud to launch this website as a resource for people who use drugs. We are going to be doing some comms activity on the 27th of November. And if you work for an organization who'd like to help us spread the word, if you scan this QR code, it'll hopefully help you send us an email to get put on a list, or email prn@ncred.org.au, or just come up and talk to me afterwards.
Lovely. Thank you so much.